I've talked to dentists that are like, oh yeah, I got this great job over here and they're going to pay me this percentage of production. And I'm like, great, how many new patients are you going to get a month? I don't know. And they get there and they're like, I got 5 new patients last month. Welcome back to another episode of My Dental Playbook. I'm your co-host, Gary Bird, along with my friend, Dr. Blake Hamblin. Today, we're going to be diving into his practice and talk about a really important subject, associates. He's going to dive into what has worked well and what hasn't worked well for his practice with hiring, as well as how to provide proper mentorship, what that looks like. And he has an onboarding document that you can use to onboard your next associate, which will save you so much time and energy. We'll give that away at the end of the show. This is super value packed. Stay tuned. All right, we're live for another episode. And today we're going to talk about everybody's favorite subject, associates. And we're going to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly. And at the end, we're going to give you a worksheet. You can go to My Dental Playbook and find a worksheet that you'll be able to go through and help you onboard associates, because how you start is typically how it's going to go. But Dr. Blake has been gracious enough to say, you know what, I'm going to dive deep into my wins, my losses, and things that have worked, haven't worked. He currently has 2 associates. Has worked with a total of 3 associates. And we're going to talk about onboarding, partner tracks, exam and treatment calibration, hard skills versus soft skills, and how to tackle that, what order, and then also mentorship, which is really, really important because that's the number one thing that all young dentists want is mentorship. So we'll tackle that last. So let's start with the onboarding plan and the partnership plan. How do you go through that? How do you work through that? You've been pretty successful with this so far.
Yeah. So I think number one is knowing that a lot of younger dentists specifically, they'll come out of school and they think that they want to be an owner at some point in their lifetime because they've kind of been told that that's like the natural next step. And so I think what I found is that conversation comes up a lot sooner than you might imagine. And so I am a big fan of handling the objection or handling the thing that may come up before it comes up. And so I think having a plan, and you don't necessarily have to share that plan day one with the associate, but I do think having a plan is wise so that when that question comes up, you're prepared to handle it and you kind of know what you're doing. I've heard way too many stories, and likely you have too, of or you get on Facebook, my associate's asking for partnership and I don't know what to do now. And like, that's the wrong time to figure that out.
Yeah, so that needs to be in the upfront and it needs to be very clear. Now, a lot of people get really scared of this, and here's what I've come to realize over the years, because it is an intimidating conversation no matter what business you're in when somebody's like, hey, I want part of your business, is everybody wants the option to be a business owner. I've learned everybody, like even my kids who aren't even 18 yet are like, hey, am I going to get your business when I'm older? I'm like, no, you're not. And so everybody wants a part of the business, but very few people want it after they see it. Like, it's a much smaller number. And so what I've seen over the years is like, hey, yeah, we have a partnership track and this is how you can go into that, but let's get you in and get you established. And they kind of see the effort and all the things that you have to do as the owner, and probably half, maybe more, just go, no, that's not for me. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do HR. I don't want to do billing. You know what I mean? I don't want to do all those things. And I'm just happy doing dentistry. So it's better that you deal with it up front, because then you don't have to deal with a weird situation later. So having that part of your onboarding, I think, is huge. What else has to be in there in your onboarding?
I think another thing, and we may hit on this later, is just like what does this process look like and what does a win look like for the associate? So I think, as one should, graduates from school, comes in and wants to take over the world and be a world beater, and that's awesome. But they're also coming from a place where they haven't had the same experiences that you might have in private practice. And it's a reason they call it the practice of dentistry. And the more you do, the better you get, the faster you get, all of those things. And so I think just having a real clear conversation of like, hey, this is what success is probably going to look like in the first 3 months. And a lot of times you can build your compensation around that too, of like, hey, for the first 3 months, we're going to keep you on a minimum. And the goal is not for you to do as much dentistry as possible. It's for you to start to feel comfortable here in this place and get to know your teammates and get to know how we operate and do things. And I don't want you to feel the pressure of needing to produce a bunch of dentistry to do that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So do you, at that point, are you having a financial conversation with them, and are you calibrating their finances at that point where it's more like they're getting just more of a salary and then less about the treatment, or how do you handle that conversation?
Yeah. So in my world, like I think 3 months feels really comfortable. I feel like in 3 months, I'll either know this is going to be a good long term fit or it's not. And so, frankly, there will be times where that won't be a good fit, and you'll know it very early. And it's your job as the business owner to make that decision to move forward in another direction. But yeah, I think it's just number one. You can just ask the question. You can say, what are your goals financially? And then you reverse engineer what that looks like and say, okay, well, you want to make X amount of dollars per year. That's great. Do you understand how that works and what that means for you to do that? And a lot of times the answer is no. And it's not because they don't. It's just because they don't know. They haven't done it.
Well, and it's funny because dental is like, it's so funny. It's like, "Oh, I got paid 31%. And it's like, of what? And it's like, well, if you would have, 31% is great, but what part of the pie are you getting? 20% would have been better of a different pie. And then also the other thing that dentists that blows my mind, they never think through, and this is kind of my world, is like, I've talked to dentists that are like, oh yeah, I got this great job over here and they're going to pay me this percentage of production. And I'm like, great. How many new patients are you going to get a month? I don't know. And they get there and they're like, I got 5 new patients last month. It's like, it almost doesn't matter what percentage you're getting at that point, right? Like
That's such a big deal. Like that's where you have to really understand. And I think like if you can meet some people in dental school that can help you do that maybe aren't even like professors, but are people that want to see you win. And maybe it's not where you end up going to work, but it's someone who knows what to look for. I could look at a contract and know what it says in about five minutes based off of those few little details and whether or not that would be a good deal for the associate or not. And so I think just having someone else in your corner who has some experience versus just thinking that you've got to figure it out or hire an attorney to tell you what's right or wrong. Like just go with somebody who's done it before and they'll help you. And it's a win-win.
reach out to me. I'll talk to you because I deal with this all the time where dentist owner doctors are asking me, like, they're like, my associate's upset I don't have enough new patients. I'm like, you got to market more then, I mean, it's not rocket science. It's fascinating because I had dental school UCLA reach out to me and they were like, hey, you want to come talk about marketing? And I'm like, what am I going to talk about marketing to a bunch of students? And they were like, well, can you do anything around helping them pick the right place to work? And I was like, sure, okay, cool. So I did this 3-hour lecture on here's how marketing works and here's how to tell if someone has enough new patients for you or not. Like, you can ask these questions. And I was blown away by how blown away they were on, like, I've never thought of that before. And so a lot of people end up at these practices where they're standing around all day, not really. And the thing is, the truth is, to get good at anything, you got to have reps. Like, you got to have reps. And if you don't have reps, you're not going to get better and you're not making money.
For sure. Yeah, and that's a huge point of contention. And I think that's where going back to onboarding, I think is having really good expectations and making sure both parties are clear on that is so critical to the success of the relationship because when expectations are off, that's where problems arise.
I know I want to jump into exam calibration and treatment calibration because I know the dentists are going to love that conversation. But before we do, I want to understand, like, one of the things that I've been told is that when you bring on an associate, you basically, you kind of become a DSO, right? I know technically you're not a DSO, but you're now in this business of servicing dentist, right? And you have these dentists that are working for you. And sometimes you have to take a little bit of financial step backwards before you can take a financial step forward. When you bring on an associate, has that been your experience, or did you just grow so fast that you kind of skip that step, or how does that work?
There was actually a really good podcast I listened to. I think it was Shared Practices, and it was when Scott Luna was on there with them, and they were just talking about different ways of growing. And I very much resonate with what Scott did and was more protecting cash flow the entire time. And I kind of built it to the point to where I was like, I can't, like, I was at the point where I was like, I can't, I was broken. And I was like, now come fix this. You know what I mean? And And I think, and again, I think it just goes back to which path do you want to take? Like I have buddies that you can grow much faster if you're willing to not to take that pay cut, right? Like if you're willing to do that, it's just a trade. But again, you have to know what is your goal, what is your intention, and how do you plan on doing this?
So you built it, just so we're on the same page. You built as far as you could until you were drowning, and then you were like, okay, I can't carry this weight very much further. So now I have to bring somebody in. Okay. All right. And then the other option is to, hey, I'm making X amount of dollars right now, and I'm going to give some of that up to bring in an associate, and then I'm going to grow again.
And the saying is kind of 3 and free. So like the thing I've learned in dentistry is most dentists don't understand that they are both the owner of McDonald's and the hamburger flipper. And just because you own the McDonald's doesn't mean you don't have to pay the hamburger flipper. And where I'm going with that is they conflate their dental income with their ownership income. And I get why it happens, but it's just wrong. And I think like if what everything has shown is that 3 associates can replace your personal doctor income. So up to that.
As the owner. So if you're just a business operator, okay, so you're the McDonald's franchise owner, 3 burger flippers replace you as the other burger flipper.
Right, exactly. Which makes sense if you're looking at like a 30% compensation, you're in the right ballpark. So,
yep. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. All right, so and I'll say this right there. Adding an associate isn't for everybody, right? So if you want to grow, there's other ways you can grow. You can start doing different kinds of treatment. You can play around a lot of different ways. You can build a hygiene more, but be more PPO and just have that like passive income coming in. And that's another engine you can build. There's lots of different ways to build more revenue without adding an associate, because it's a different game you're playing at that point, and it's not for everybody. So I really like that call out. Okay, so let's talk about exam and treatment calibration. How do you think through that? What's the right way to tackle that with a new associate?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different thoughts there. And I know like a lot of associates come out of school, and another big question like you hit on was, how many new patients am I going to see a month? Who gets to see these patients? Who gets to see those? And in my opinion, I think part of my job is actually to use my greatest skill. And though I can prep a great crown, so can my other dentists on our team. And my greatest skill is actually talking to patients and closing treatment. And so if I can do the most exams I can possibly do and fill up their schedules to do the treatment, then that's a win, because they're super happy. I'm super happy because I'm doing what I want to do. And it's kind of a win-win. So I think knowing what is your philosophy there, like, do you want your associate doing more exams and building the rapport that way? Or do you want to do them and feed their schedule? I think that's kind of the first step in figuring out which way do I want to go with this.
So just for simple terms, you are you are doing the exams, communicating with the patient, and your skill set is usually, the owner's skill set is usually not the skill set of the new people, right? So your strongest suit, you're better clinically probably because you've had more reps, right? And those kind of things, but you're exponentially more experienced on communicating. And so you are grabbing the communication and then punting the treatment to them. And so you're feeding your associates that way. And the way that we talked about this is hard skills versus soft skills. Hard skills are the technical hard skills. Soft skills are communication, those empathy, those kind of things.
And it's not that they can't do some of the exams, but it's from a business perspective, like we just talked about, you're already personally going backwards a little bit. So how do you fight some of that? Is like you go help fill the schedule so that everyone else can be busy. You know what I mean? And so I think like whether you've been doing dentistry for a year or 4 years or 40 years, the hardest thing in dentistry is not drilling into a tooth and putting a filling in it. That's not the hardest thing in dentistry. The hardest thing in dentistry is having other people that you're working around and other things that pop up that you're like, how did this happen? You know what I mean? The dentistry becomes really, really easy. And so my goal would be get really good at the really easy part, and then we'll work on the really hard part. The really hard part is like reading how a person is. Like I talk to a teacher much differently than I talk to an engineer. And I talk to an engineer much differently than I would talk to a scientist.
Yeah, I love that. And so hard skills are easier to learn for a dentist because that's why they got into dentistry. The soft skills are typically the harder part. And that's true for everybody. Like that's true for every business. Marketing's way easier for a marketer to learn than selling marketing to dentists, so, or managing the accounts. Like managing the accounts with dentists, super hard compared to just doing the marketing is fairly easy compared to that. So I love that. Now, the number one thing or do we need to talk about treatment calibration in there too? So the exam, you would just recommend, hey, you're the owner, just take all the exams, punt the treatment, let them get better. Do you need to talk about how to do the treatment, or how do you handle that with the associates?
Yeah. So, and I don't think that associates can't do an exam. I just think that I think it's in the best interest, especially at the beginning, for the owner to.
They're going to get more opportunities if you're doing it. They're going to get more opportunities. You might only get 4 or 5 more yeses, but if you're getting 4 or 5 more yeses a week, that generates a lot more revenue for the company. It's more happy patients, the associates are going to be happier, right? They're getting more reps.
This is kind of where the treatment calibration comes in. Is like I had an awesome mentor. His name's Colin Lathrop, and he's a winner. And when I was first coming out of school, and even as an owner, on Wednesdays I would go out to his office and I would shadow him and listen to how he spoke to patients and whatnot. And the biggest thing that he ever told me was, he told me, you've got a treatment plan, to type it on. And what he meant was, if they look at their teeth, and if their teeth don't look like what the plastic model perfect teeth would look like, what would it take to get them there? And so that's how I look at every single patient, whether I've seen them for 15 years or I'm meeting them for the first time today, is I look at their teeth and I just start asking them questions. Have you ever considered doing anything with the front teeth? Does this bother you at all? Are there any concerns that you have with your smile? All of those things. And what that does is, when you address that stuff and you start to have those conversations, and your associates are following you around, learning how you're thinking and what you're looking at, the reason that you're able to close more is because you see more. The new doctor simply just doesn't see. They see the broken tooth. They don't see why the broken tooth happened, right? So it goes from a single crown to, now we're talking about doing a full mouth rehab. You know what I mean? And those are the difference.
Yeah. And you're figuring out, again, back to the soft skills, because that's the hard skill you just talked about, of being able to do that and identify that. But then the soft skill is getting the patient comfortable with you, to be able to trust you to even have that conversation, right? If the patient just goes, no, I don't want anything, I don't want to talk to you, it's hard to do the dentistry at that point. So that's a great point. Okay. Are you okay on time to talk about this last topic? Okay. So the last thing is mentorship. And you said, before we hit record, you said, and I love this quote, mentorship is a two-way street. It's not a one-way street. And a lot of people think it's a one-way street. So how do you think through mentorship? I know this is the number one thing that dentists want, and they feel that they don't ever get. Everybody talks about it, but I've seen a lot of different graphs and studies and people surveying dentists about this. So how do you think through mentorship?
Yeah, I think it's just really important, if you're seeking mentorship, for you to also have a plan on what that looks like. You have to remember that the people that you're wanting to teach you things got there because they were doing the things. And there are a lot of things that I do well, and there are a lot of things that I don't do well, but I don't really know what the goal of the person that's coming to shadow or to get mentored or what have you, or the associate. What is your goal? Like, if you hate surgery and all I do is talk to you about surgery, well, then I'm not mentoring you, but I think I'm mentoring you. So there has to be a communication of like, hey, I've learned that when you go in and do treatment plans, you treatment plan way more and way better than I do, and I want to know how to do that. Can you teach me how to do that? Absolutely. But if I don't know that that's something you want to learn, and I don't value it as much as you do, well, then there's a discrepancy there, and no one wins. And I'm wasting your time and you're wasting my time.
Where does mentorship begin and end in your mind? Because there's different kinds of things. There's like personal life, like, hey, who you marry really matters, and that's more important than dentistry. You know what I mean? Because you can mess up your whole life. There's how to manage the money that you're making from dentistry. That's super important, right? If you want to buy a private jet right out of the box, like, it's going to put a lot of pressure on you to do a lot of dentistry, right? And then there's the actual dentistry hard and soft skills. So is that all part of it, or is it only what the person wants, or how do you think through that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the hard and soft skills, that's mutually beneficial. So I think that's something that you just have to do as an owner and as an associate if you want to improve. But yeah, I mean, I think it doesn't have to stop anywhere. It just depends on where the relationship goes. Like, we're a Christian-owned business, and so, like, there are times where we will talk about faith stuff while we're hanging out in the back, and that may not be the norm in other offices, but it is here. And so if there was a question of like, "Hey, this happened, and how would you have handled this, and how would you have loved on this person better?" Like, we can talk about that stuff. And so, again, I think it just comes down to like, what is the person that wants to grow and learn from this other individual? What do they want? Like, do they want to be taught? Because I've also learned, like, you can think you're helping somebody and they're like, yeah, yeah, hit the road, man. I don't care what you have to say.
Yeah, about that subject, right? They might want the dentistry help, but they might not want the personal life help, right? And it's like, I totally agree. And I think too, age plays a huge role in this, that I found. Like, younger people want a lot of certain kinds of attention or help or mentorship, and they may not want to hear about retirement, right? And I'm like, hey, you really need to start your 401k right now because we're going to match it. And they're like, you know what I mean? Like, they don't care. They're 20 years old versus somebody who's 30 and has kids. They're much more interested in that particular topic. So I love that. And I think, it's hard. Mentorship's hard. Like, because especially in dental, I think it's just that much harder.
Well, because there's just so many different ways you can go. I mean, I've seen so many different models of dentistry that can work well, and everybody wants to know, well, what's the one way? And it's like, man, and I mean, you work with so many different offices, and like, you can grow an all in four practice, or you can do a full arch practice, or you can grow with new patients, or you can. There's so many different ways you can grow, and that's kind of where we started, was like knowing what your goals are. And I think that was the one thing that I did well, was I had like a really good plan of, right after school, I started taking surgery. I did the oral surgery honors program in school, and I loved surgery. And I was like, literally 2 months after graduation, I was taking an implant course. And I was like, I want that. And lo and behold, Colin Lathrop, my mentor, guess where he taught surgery stuff? At Implant Pathways. So it's like, I've got a mentor who's teaching me both communication and surgery, and he had already built what I wanted. And so I was like, okay, yeah, let me just go learn what this guy does and see how fast I can reproduce it. And he was super kind to share all that, and he wanted me to win, and he's amazing.
How many, when you got started in dental, like, how many mentors would you say that you had?
And a lot. I would go to these courses, and I would just connect with these coaches and the teachers that are there, and I would get their phone numbers, and we would text, and I would always pick up something. And it wasn't always necessarily a clinical skill, but it was always something that I would see them do, and that was different. What did you do there? Or like, I saw them talk to them this way, and then I'd follow, hey, why did you say what you said there? I'm interested to know more about that. And they were always so. That's what I've noticed, is people are. I think there's a world that dentists live in, and they're like, once you graduate, like, you can't ask questions to colleagues because they don't want to help you. And I've found that to be the exact opposite. Like, I found most people really enjoy helping other people and sharing what they're good at, and you just have to ask them.
Yeah. I know that this is the case because I've worked with people that they were reaching out to you. I didn't know that. They were just calling you, and you're like, yeah, I've been talking to them every week and helping them with this, that, or the other. So I know you're super gracious with your time, and just this podcast is evidence of that. So I appreciate you sharing this. This is super, super useful. Let us know what questions didn't we cover in this show that you would like to know more about associates. That'll help us make the next episode. And I'm excited for everybody to keep growing. Dr. Blake, as always, wonderful job. And thank you so much for being willing to teach us all the good stuff that you've learned along the way.
Absolutely. I enjoy it. And thanks for having me as always.